Islam family.
Islam.
I'd like to give honors to all of you coming. Give honors to all the active Moors, and we'll just get into this class today, which is going to be on the jurisdiction of the MSTA and discussing some of the discrepancies, between the understanding of the MSTA as it relates to the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, Gold Canaanite Temple, and moving at Gold. Right? So I'm Tezba Sarbay, chairman of Temple in Canaanland. This is Monday, April 2nd, 2012. And we'll just start off with the Moorish American prayer, 5 on the left, 2 on the right. Allah, the Father of the universe.
Allah, the Father of the universe.
The Mother and Father of love.
Mother and Father of love.
Truth. Peace.
Freedom.
And justice.
Allah
is our protector.
Allah is our protector.
Our guide.
And
our salvation. By night. And by day. Through his and our holy prophet. Drew Ali. Amen. Ameen. Ashe. Hotep. Islam. Peace, family. So, first off, we have to make some assumptions, or we have to clear some things up, right? In terms of what it is that we're involved with, and what the jurisdiction is of different pieces of this movement, right? So the first thing that is understood is that we're part of a movement, right? A global, universal movement, if you want, right? And we call that the Moorish Divine and National Movement. So the Moorish Divine and National Movement is a movement to, whether people know it or not, bring the people who want to live the lifestyle that their ancestors lived, according to their own ways, all around the world, to help bring those people back into that way of life, without having to fight wars necessarily, without having to come into contention with anybody and take anybody's stuff or do anything untoward, right? That's why it's a divine movement as well, because it's on the positive. Whatever has to be done has to be done. You know what I mean? When fires come, people get burned. That's within the context of each situation, right? So the Moorish Divine and National Movement of the world, we understand it's of the world, right? Part of the contention in the days of Drew Ali was that Moors tried to make Drew Ali our prophet. They tried to say, well, this guy he's ours, he's for us, and he came to free us black people type of concept. When really he's a universal prophet, and he came to bring all the republics of the world back into knowledge of who they are and what they're supposed to be doing, right? And when that time, we're in that time now, it's just a matter of knowing who you are and what you want, right? You want to be corporate fiction, or you just want to be yourself in the republic, right? Have your vote for all of the goings on of your government. So that's the movement, right? Then there's the old Canaanite temple, right? Now the movement is something that Drew Ali is a part of. Now, Drew Ali didn't really start the movement. The movement's something that's been going on from, the independence of countries in the West after colonialism. That's the movement. And everybody knew it, Toussaint, in Haiti knew what he was doing. He knew also that other people around the world were doing the same thing, right? Cuba, anywhere you go, where the people established the Republican form of government, or re-established the Republican form of government that was taken, or that was, covered. So, understanding that, you understand why Drew Ali has this uncovering the 101. Because during in most countries, it's a Republican form of government. Everyone has one vote, and you also find that the state of women, or the condition that women's lives are in, at the feminine principle, is much better. That's what Republican forms of government allow. Not democracy. Democracy is the thing that is not. Democracy is not a form of government. Right? It's a politics to cover up what's really supposed to be going on. So that, all of that is to say that without that understanding, then your perspective from there is always going to be skewed, even if just a little bit, because you're like, people are going to be doing things, and you're going to be thinking that, you know, halfway across the world, that that's not having to do with you. Or we'll talk about stuff that came before Drew Ali, and people won't understand that that was still part of the movement. People want to play like, you know, Drew Ali came and he brought us something that was brand new, and that since it was brand new, like, we have to fight over it, and you know, and no one has a say unless they, you know, someone gave them some sort of authority, right? When it's your movement, right? It's our movement to be yourself, and then if it's to be yourself, then who can really give you the authority to be yourself? Only you, only you, right? So that's the movement. Old Canaanite Temple, we know that was established in 1913, and so from there, you go to the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, later on 1925, and then you start to have some confusion. So part of the confusion is not understanding that before 1928, right, which is on the back of the 101s, 1928, the date of the incorporation of the Moorish Science Temple of America, that the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, right, which was brought forth out of the Old Canaanite Temple, the Moorish Holy Temple of Science was already operating, right? And it was operating as a civic organization with a juridic person, as it said, right? So what basically Drew Ali did was he used he used his own authority, right? He used that sovereign authority to establish something that in terms of the Moorish Holy Temple of Science was also on record with all of the so-called authorities and all of the so-called government at the time. It wasn't incorporated, it was on record that the Moors are doing what they want to do and what they feel they need to do.
And keep in mind that things have purposely been changed by people in order for the common people not to get this from the lowest level that it's supposed to be received on, right? Because the lowest level of this is the highest level of it, right? Because the different sections were created for certain things, right? So the Old Canaanite Temple had a jurisdiction that its activity was involved in. Then the Moorish Holy Temple of Science is the first branch of the movement that actually had a label as to what it is. As far as the writings, like there's no real writings that I've seen, and you know, like we deal with Taj and nature and these people, right? Like there's no real documentation about the Old Canaanite Temple and from the Old Canaanite Temple, right? That's information that's been wiped out. All you know is that there was such a thing. And nobody could deny that there was such a thing called Old Canaanite Temple that was founded in 1913. But then you have some questionnaires, the same thing that has the R authority on the back, saying that, you know, some of them say the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, adopted as the corporate name Moorish Science Temple, and then some say the Moorish Science Temple adopted as the corporate name Moorish Science Temple. And then those ones would say in the questionnaire, question 9, that the Moorish Science Temple of America was founded in 1913. Like, when that's a fraud. Anybody who says that out their mouth, Moorish Science Temple founded in 1913, fraud. Why? Because in the Moorish leaders' historical message to America, right? Now this is Noble Drew Ali laying it out, that we organized as the Moorish Temple of Science in the year 1925. Right? He didn't mention Old Canaanite Temple in this. But he's saying that this particular branch called Moorish Holy Temple of Science was organized in 1925. And then in 1926, it was incorporated as a civic organization. Right? And that's 1926. And then the name Moorish Temple of Science was changed to Moorish Science Temple of America in 1928. And then in 1929, Noble Drew Ali was dead. So the Moorish Science Temple of America is the last extension of the Moorish movement, which wasn't even really in activity a year. So how could that be the foundation if that hasn't even been the activity? Right? Because yes, it is said that Noble Drew Ali said that the Moorish Science Temple of America is largely religious. It's a largely religious organization, right? But he also said that the object of our organization is to help in the great program of uplifting fallen humanity. That's the job of the people who say that I am Moorish Science Temple of America, or I am Old Canaanite Temple, or I am Moorish Holy Temple of Science, or Noble Drew Ali brought this information to me, or whatever. If they talk about anything with relation to the Prophet, the job is uplifting fallen humanity, nothing else. But why is it that? Because that makes a national organization have a Rotarian complexion. And then Moors will just read this and say, yeah, I read the Prophet. Okay, what's Rotarian mean? Like, what's that? Like, he said this word, Rotarian. So, could anybody say what Rotarian is?
I've only heard of it when you hear about things like the Rotary.
All right.
Like a civic organization
All right.
that does good for the community and all that.
Oh, okay. All right. So, Rotary Club, noun, right? A club of local, professional, and businessmen allied to an international organization called Rotary International and devoted to improving civic service and advancing goodwill among nations. That's Rotary Club. And then Noble Drew Ali said that this national organization has a Rotarian complexion.
Yeah, I had wondered about that, but I never looked into it myself.
Yeah. Right? But that's why it's Moorish Science Temple. Because by the time it got to him having to corporatize the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, it was because people weren't ready. That's why he did it. He didn't do it because secondary, he did it because he knew that the stock market was going to crash, and you know we needed something corporate in order to maneuver still, right? But it wasn't ultimately that first. It was because of the people. And that's why he said Moorish Science Temple, because when you look up Moorish, it'll tell you, okay, of relating to the Moors. And then when you look up science, it'll tell you study. So this is really the study temple. And if you study, you're going to have a dictionary because you're going to look up words, and that's just the standard. Right? But we'll have like a, you know, we'll read a Dr. Benny book, front to end. And yeah, we're conscious. But what if we actually looked up all the words that we didn't know? That we just assumed we know what the meaning of this word is. Right? So he set it up so that there's a place for everybody to slot themselves in to this. There's a place for the dirty Moors to slot themselves in, where they're going to be trying to copyright the Circle 7 and foolishness. Right? They have their spot because they're around today and they're exercising as Moorish Science Temple. But that's a separate jurisdiction than the foundation. I don't care if they have the Moroccan flag and the United States treaty and Amity banner, and they have a picture of the Prophet, and they have a building and it said Moorish Science Temple in the front, right? And you know, if the Prophet was here, he would go to that temple and go visit or whatever. That's not what this was about. This was supposed to be like a united way. You know, go to, you know, use the collateral that we have as the Moors, the heirs of the North Gate, that Noble Drew Ali is part of the family that got land back because they said that this was their land. And he's in the family. And people are going to say, oh yeah, he got his power from the Queen and the Pope gave him power. Like that's how he got his fame and nobility, from the Queen and the Pope. When they don't even know that his family like sued the United States. Like straight, you guys are a corporation, and we're gonna sue you guys because you're squatters and you don't want to live up to the constitutional foundation that's set up in this great republic. Right? So when we go into Noble Drew Ali's work and we read what he said, forget about what everybody else says. I'll go what he said. He said that, okay, well, it was founded in 1925. The Moorish Holy Temple of Science was organized. And in 1926, it became a civic organization. And in 1928, that name was changed to another name, and that was corporate. But he didn't, there's nowhere that it says he dissolved anything. That, well, we're going to start Moorish Science Temple, and nobody can mention Moorish Holy Temple of Science again because that's dissolved and nobody could use it.
But, so then the question is, if there are those who are still using the old names, let's just put it that way, then their purpose would still be the same. It's for the upliftment of fallen humanity,
Exactly.
but they just have a different status because of the fact that they're not corporate. Is that right?
Right, exactly, right. It's not going to be corporate. It's going to be a group of Moors came together, right? And based on the Prophet saying that this is your Moorish movement, and all you have to do is proclaim your nationality. Yeah, he said go to the Moorish Science Temple to do that, but what's been the pattern? People go to the Moorish Science Temple to go nationalize, and then they get turned back. Or you know, because of the abuse the temple got, people look at the temple negatively, not knowing that that's a separate jurisdiction. The craziness and confusion that people hear about. When you say Moor Science Temple and then you're hearing about this guy got shot and this happened to this guy and you know somebody got arrested and well, that's not the Moorish movement. That's just some people who know about their nationality and birthrights and they choose to exercise. And the pressure that they get isn't because they did something wrong. It's because they're doing something right. And they're going to use those people to scare the sheep. Because all you have to do is, and the sheep are running. Sheep jump. Or whatever. Right? But this was set up. So it's like so people are getting blocked when they go to Moor Science Temple of America route. Right? And then now they just abandon it. Because they think that that's it. That Moor Science Temple of America is it. There's nothing else but Moor Science Temple of America. When the name Noble Drew Ali comes up or Moors in America comes up or whatever. Like you don't hear about Moorish Holy Temple of Science. Right? The average person is not gonna go in depth to study to find that out because like that's like buried information almost. Like you have to be on the inside to get the information. You know? And things like about you know, Noble Drew Ali having a newspaper. And Noble Drew Ali meeting with Oscar the priest, and you know like you know the Pan American Conference and these type of things. Like at that time, like in 1913 to 1929, you're talking about this brother that's like in like he's not just in his paper. But he or the nation's paper, right? Because the paper that the Moorish Guide is the paper of the nation. It's not like the temple paper or that's the national paper. That all the Moors all around are supposed to be putting their articles to that, and then push that everywhere. Not everybody have their own paper, because that's not even logical. Instead of all you 500 guys having your own paper, how about just put to one paper? But then egos are going to get in the way because some people want to say Moor Science Temple of America from 1913 when that's not what the Prophet said. And that's fraud if you're going to do that. But again, that's a jurisdiction outside of what this really is, because what it's about is uplifting fallen humanity. So if somebody says, I'm Moor Science Temple of America, then okay, well, show me what you've done to uplift fallen humanity. Well, we have a temple, and you know, you can come to our temple and get nationalized and learn about your birthrights, and we have classes on Sunday and Tuesday and Wednesday, and okay, cool. But like, what have you done to uplift fallen humanity? What service have you provided for the nations who are also part of this? That there's some Moors that push people out because they look a certain way. You're not a Moor, right? When everybody is a child of the dark-skinned people. And the last name that those people fell as is Moors. And they had that name for until Kemet fell. When Kemet fell, they adopted Moors. And they adopted Moor, M-R, in honor of their ancestors. And that's why MR means pyramid. Because they took the name in honor of their ancestors, to the point where the Great Seal is on the dollar bill. More. Because this is, the foundation didn't start with Noble Drew Ali, like Chairman was saying. He sparked the being able to bring these people back into it now. But it's been going on before him. He never brought Moors, right? That's why people, you know, like, some people get mad with certain people when they tell people, yo, like, get off Noble Drew Ali's Bozak. Like, it's not only about him. There was Moors before him, obviously. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that's what people don't, the general population doesn't understand that. Anybody you talk to, Moors, that ain't conscious yet or whatever, anybody, and you talk about Moors, they still talk about 7-Eleven. That's what they talk about.
That's what they know.
And so they, when, I guess, so they look at it from that perspective and they figure, okay, well, Noble Drew Ali came along in the 20th century, or 19th century, and so between the fall in 1492 and his arrival on the planet, there were no Moors, and he kind of created them. I don't know. I have no idea really, but it's very much. And just the other day, I was talking to somebody at work, and you know, where are you from? I tell them where I'm from. Where are your parents from? Where you at? Where from are you? You know, how far back do you want me to go? And you know, and you mentioned the word Moor. Oh, I thought they were around in 7-Eleven. Yeah, well, we just appeared in 7-Eleven and we disappeared. Like, think about it, you know what I mean? It's not that, just connect the dots, you know, it's not that, that's not that hard. They don't think about any other people on this planet. You wouldn't say, well, the Chinese people were only around during the Ming Dynasty. You know what I mean? They were always there, and they're still here now. And everybody, other nation of people, but the minute you try to talk to, and I don't get angry, you know, and I'll explain it to them, because it's something that we didn't know anything about for a long time, myself included. So when you meet people like that, you just lay it out for them. And it's very logical. It's not something that's way out there, you know. This is where we're from, you know.
Because it's not even like that. It's unfortunate that, you know, there's, you know, quote unquote dirty Moors that try to bury just the truth about, you know, nationality and birthrights. That it's the people's own, and yo, we have to just give it to them. You know, like we should just stop people on the street. Hey, you know what your nationality and birthrights? No, but you need to come to the temple tomorrow. We have a meeting. No, well, I have to. No, like you don't have anything to do but go to the temple tomorrow. Like, didn't you see the news? Didn't you see the paper? Well, yeah, I saw the picture with the guy with the fez, but, you know, I just thought, you know, what's that much thing have to do with me or whatever? Well, no, it has to do with you. Right? Like, it's there, it's the people's stuff. It's not our stuff. Right? You know, and that's the problem, that they don't want it. And it's theirs. You know? But they've been conditioned. It's been programmed, you know, to not go out on a limb. Right? Because once the man could go out on a limb and realize that, oh, hold on a second, like, I could go out this limb and I could just grab that one, and I don't have to worry about this limb breaking.
It's true.
Right?
Well, it's conditioned. It's all conditioning.
It's all conditioning.
All conditioning.
Right? It's all conditioning. Yeah. So
concerning the incident people were following that happened a few weeks ago, the brother in the feds on the highway, that Kudo mentioned.
Right. Oral Statements and Prophecies, number 168. Brother G. Cook Bay, GS of Temple 1, said that the Holy Prophet Drew Ali said, one day you are going to look out to the streets, and the streets are going to be filled with men with turbans and fezzes, and the highways are going to be blocked.
Didn't that just happen a couple weeks ago? well, maybe it wasn't filled with children's professors, but they had to block out that
That's the
407.
block the highway off. That part of the
They don't
prophecy
want,
came
they
true
don't want
there.
another set of people going on the highway, like what the Tamils
Right.
did the
Yes.
other day.
Right. So, Moorish Science Temple of America is United Way, food bank, whatever, right? And that's what it is. And that's the activity that Moors have to be doing. This is more for Moors who are out there that are sincere, but they're trapped by their grand chief. Because their grand chief's gonna say, no, you can't do that until, I have to talk to the council, and then it takes 5 years to talk to the council or whoever, and nothing doesn't get done. Right? It's deliberate. Just because they don't want the people to know that it's theirs and have their own temple. Every member of a Moorish Science Temple should have their own temple.
Wow.
Right? Let's manifest that. Every, member of the Moorish Science Temple is a mufti. Every member of the Moorish Science Temple is a third heaven adept with a certificate. And then those who can't reach that level of saying, okay, well, yeah, I want to be adept or whatever, they want to chill and just come sometimes and sometimes don't come, and, like, be sideways with it, opposed to doing their job, then take off your turban and fez and go back to the corporate state. Because if we have what Noble Jolly brought and we don't activate it, it's useless. It's just words on a page sitting there.
You don't get rich counting your neighbor's money, honey.
For real. Right? So this is the general laws as said by the prophet, Tuesday, October 17th, 1928. Every temple and the head is to function by words, deeds, and actions imitating the prophet, especially when teaching a group of Moors, any group of Moors. These are the general laws. The supreme laws will be handed to you later. The heads of all temples are to submit a monthly report of all finance. The heads of all temples are to refrain from all wrathful words, profanity in the mildest form, from all members of his temple to her temple. They must live the life of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, and refrain from all alcoholic liquors or any other harmful possibility that will terminate to destroy peace or any other of the divine principles. They are not to contribute to anything that will cause the public to disagree with him or her. And for one to lead a group of Moors, you must keep your house clean with good deeds, kind words. Your wives, brothers must hear good works, kind words, and must know of your good deeds. If there are children, you must see to their support. Follow this divine principle, for if you don't restrict to this divine principle, then you are not a true Moor. And the heads are not to charge for membership, or to overcharge for cards, buttons, or anything issued by the prophet. Those who contribute to either of the preceding are not Moors but robbers. Membership, sisters and brothers, is free, not only here but all over the world. The button is 25 cents, the card is 25 cents, and 1 month's dues are paid. Every member pays 50 cents a month for dues. This money goes to the support of the temple. This, if not paid, does not entitle you to the protection that is provided for you, and especially if you are not working or in the position to work. If you neglect to fulfill this small duty assigned you, you can rightfully expect money or other help when you are sick or otherwise disabled. And to be a real Moorish leader, you must study the Quran and the divine constitution that is handed down unto you by I the Prophet. The head of any temple can maintain an emergency fund, which cannot exceed the amount of 25 cents to 50 cents a week per member. All public collections and dues also go to support the temple and its domestic work. The head of every temple must by law obey the word of the Prophet, and if any head leader or head of any temple fails to obey these laws, embezzlement is the charge and is subject to enforcement of the law by grand body. And the penalty may be a fine or removal from office or placed under a very heavy restriction of the law. So there's heads of temples who somebody do something and they don't say, we're gonna take your title. They say that we're gonna take your nationality. Right? Yeah. That's the level that they use as far as like the tactics, the underlying tactics that heads, right, that came in from the beginning, and then they have people today who learn from the people who were directly responsible for Drew Ali's death and hiding information. And then those people are gonna, be on a perspective of, well, I'm from temple. What temple are you from? Well, who's your grand chief? Well, what's the succession of your temple? Well, what seals do you have on your charter? And what?
Competition.
Like, what are you talking about? How about I'm not showing you anything, and you show me your uplifting humanity work? How about you show me your membership list and the dues that they've been paying and how long that you've been running your temple for? And how about show me some of the civic activity that you've done, right? Which the civic activity is going to make the members better citizens because they're going to be doing for others without expecting anything in return, just because that's your job. Uplift all of humanity. Put your hand in the hole and pull somebody up. Just look at them in the hole. Now there's a difference if you put your hand and they don't want to take your hand. That's different, because there are people like that who would just chill in the hole and they're content in the hole, right? Complaining about every and anything, but outside the hole is everything that they ever wanted and everything that they ever need. So they never come out the hole because of agents, infiltrators that are heads, not low level. Because remember, 1913 to 1925, everybody around Drew Ali was a disciple. We're not gonna look at them as just like how we look at it. Just some brothers and sisters coming together, you know about our nationality and birthrights, and let's organize and do something like that. That's not what that was back then. Like, those people around him, like, they were given the lessons. They were given everything. Right? That just like our foundation. Grand Sheikh Daweed Ali El, Grand Governor Aki Bey, Grand Chairman Mentu Hotep Bey, Chicago Moors, Grand Sheikh Kenny Umar Bey. Moors that when we went to the temple, that just gave everything. I gave everything that you need to know about the Prophet and having a temple and whatever nearby. Go replay in Canaanland, because we need that. That's a big part of North America. That you're the only Moors that's up there. So here's everything. Right? Everything, like stuff that It's been 4 years, stuff didn't even come out yet. Because that's how much stuff there is. And how backed up it is, and why everybody has to come in and see it as theirs, so it's not a fight to, you know, read this big book about the Moors. That's some more wrote that you don't know, but you know, might as well just read this book. What else am I gonna read right now? You know? Because there's so much information out there with regard to the Prophet and what he brought and the jurisdiction of the Moorish Divine and National Movement. That it's like it goes into every field of study. Right? Which, like, if you look at it conceded, like logically it should, because that's the ancient Egyptian mystery system information. It's the same thing. It's just called Moorish now. But the science is no different. It's still that same science that they had in ancient Kemet. Like, exactly. It's just called something different, relating to the people that have it now. That George G. M. James said that the Moors are the custodians of the ancient Egyptian culture when Egypt fell. So if the Moors are custodians and there's still Moors around today, then who took that away from the Moors? And how did they get it? And the easiest way for them to get it is just to get Moors out of the people's minds. Peace, values. Because they know that they can't defeat the Moors. Especially if Moors are especially if like with the Prophet in the front and you start talking about Moors, it makes it a lot easier, because he was a statesman. Like, people knew about him, right? They might not have known about him by, you know, by name, but they seen a picture or something of this man in the feds that founded this thing and telling black people that, you know, they didn't come from Africa or something like that. I really don't know exactly, but, you know, I knew it was something about him telling them they're not black and Negro and something like that. Like, people know about him, right? And being that they know about him and we don't know about him, like, why not put him up front instead of trying to take the position, which comes back to the agents that always want to be the guy. I'm the guy that did. I'm the guy that. I'm the one that. If it wasn't for me doing whatever, nothing. Right? When Prophet did everything already. Like, all we had to do is just slot ourselves into a park. You can slot yourself into the Moorish Science Temple of America Religious Corporation Tax Jurisdiction, which is one jurisdiction. You can slot yourself into the Moorish Science Temple of America Religious Corporation, that's not tax, that's a jurisdiction. You can slot yourself into the Moorish Science Temple of America Corporate Religious Organization. You can slot yourself into the Moorish Corporate. Once you deal with the corporate, know that that's a deep rabbit hole. Once you go Moorish Science Temple of America and don't connect Moorish Holy Temple of Science, Old Canaanland Temple, Moorish Divine and National Movement to it, you're playing in the shark pool. Because that's what that jurisdiction was created by the Prophet for. To trap those leechers there. Right? You know where he talks about it? Because Drew Ali said everything I say is spirit, so Morris had better heed. Everything I say is spirit. No. Right? Okay. Moors are men, upright, independent, and fearless, who care for their loved ones and follow the Prophet to a destiny which is not uncertain or unknown. They are fortified by the impregnable doctrine built upon love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. It is therefore folly at its greatest height for smelly culprits with their insidious plans to invade such a realm. They try and try, but their own bad planning brings down wrath upon their heads like the sword old Damocles had. Intrigue and scurrilous cunnings find a difficult path to travel within the ranks of the Moors. This is so because the Moorish movement has been well planned by Prophet Noble Drew Ali, whose latent powers are abundant, unknown, and may be called into action as a matter of defense at any moment. Prophet Noble Drew Ali knows the people within his ranks who are interested. They are the vanguard of the movement as the Moorish hordes increase here in America. All of the Moors are active, not passive. A member's interest can only be in one direction, and having traveled over the road years before, the Prophet knows where every member is along the road. Right? So, all that he's talking about right there is Moorish Science Temple of America, the original, the Moorish Science Temple of America that was Rotarian in its nature, not the corporate Moorish Science Temple of America. Right? He's talking about the Moorish Holy Temple of Science of the world, Old Canaanland Temple, and the Moorish Divine and National Movement. Right? And then this is where he's talking about the corporate and everything under the corporate Moorish Science Temple of America now. Right? A few feet below is another road where schemers walk, where traitors grin and culprits bask in the sun. They think that they are on the same road with the true Moors, but the Moors are high above on a pinnacle where they might view the destructionists as they fall for the last time, and their bones bleach in the sultry midday sun. Hungry scavengers flying high, catch scent, devour and cry out, Kavit Emtor, cast out the dead carcass. The Moors high above see these plotters, purveyors, the worst that exists, hurl themselves downward by their own works as the hawks wait. Right? So Noble Drew Ali knew that there were sellout traders and everything in the temple when he was alive. Like, he knew. And he set up the movement perfect. That everybody has a part. Right? It's like for example, you have Moors go and copyright the Circle 7. Right? If it's copywritten, how come we can still read it and quote from it or whatever?
Exactly.
Obviously, like, it's not copywritten. Even though they went and they actually have something saying that, yeah, we copywritten. Right? There's a block on it.
Purpose for that?
Huh?
Was there
They're just trying to own the stuff so the people can't get it. You know? Like there's even like documents that were filed in the Library of Congress by Moors who were under the tutelage of Noble Drew Ali, that they founded certain organizations, right? Moorish institutions. And the people who came after the founders moved the stuff in the Library of Congress.
like moved it somewhere else. Like it had a number that you can go and you can just call and just say, yo, I want this number. And then now you call and that number is not what that is. The number is a different thing.
You can't even find it now.
And yeah, and the people in there don't have the power to change the number because it's not their jurisdiction. Right? That's tampering with people's stuff that they can't do because they take the oath of the Constitution to work in the Library of Congress. Right? So they know what the law is, and you know they might not know
So how do we get the power to change the number in the first place?
by just like the Moors with Noble Drew Ali assume that they can copyright, right? Assume that they can change the number and that's gonna change, you know, it being able to be found, right? When you know there's many ways to skin a cat, right? Which is what they never thought about, like the sellouts. They thought they had this rock stopping battle, like yeah, you know what I mean? We raided the fund, you know what I mean? We made Moorish Science Temple of America's, Temple of Islam's. In a year, we're gonna change those to Nation of Islam's, and then, yo, we just sit back, right? Right? We just sit back. And let our bones bleach in the sultry midday sun. Right? You know? But they thought that, yo, nobody's gonna catch what's going on. You know? But luckily for, you know, the Prophet being the mastermind that he was, you know what I mean? You know, he set up the movement that is really based on the first principle, love. It's based on sincerity. You know, it's not based on how much knowledge you have. You can have all the knowledge and you might just want to try to own stuff, take over, start copyrighting stuff that's not even yours to copyright. You know, just because you have a title. Right? You know, like people who wanna like debate me. Right? Other Moors, like with fezzes on and stuff like that, right? Want to debate me and want me to give up my title because, oh, I'm not qualified, right? But they're not going to go to the people who gave me the title and say that, even though they know who those people are, right? Because, like, what are you talking about? You're supposed to be out there doing something, uplifting for humanity, right? Like that's the name of the game. But you want to debate about things that are supposed to be common knowledge because you have a fez on, right? If anybody's telling me about, yeah, well, Noble Drew Ali and he's the prophet and you know, and he brought this and he brought that and you know, like he's the founder, but they're not talking about Heard's revised statute and juridic person and divine being the real religion, you know, of aligning your chakras, and that's why there's a big 7 on the front. If they're just looking at it from this is some group that they're gonna come and join, like you disqualified yourself. Because the movement's just sitting there waiting for the Moors to take it and do with it what you're supposed to do with it. But they don't want to do that because they think they're under the impression that what the sellouts did affects the movement. When it doesn't, that's a separate jurisdiction. That has absolutely nothing to do with the organic Moorish movement. It's not relative. Because if somebody says we're the Vatican and they build this big thing or whatever, just like the Vatican, right? Like who are people gonna go with? The one that's been there forever, or you're gonna go with these new guys that are just coming and say, yeah, that they're the founders of Rome.
Especially if they say, we're the Vatican and we're gonna copyright the Bible.
yeah, right. You know what I mean? You know, so it's clear that there's been a sellout, right? But it's also clear that nobody wants to really talk about it because, you know, then you're going to be talking about some people that you might be studying under for 30, 40 years. You know, that you become the student of the master teacher. But he didn't tell you that there was a master teacher before him that you learned from. And that's across the board. Because nobody until you come into this, nobody takes Noble Drew Ali serious. It's just, Moors, nobody takes time to dissect and digest what he really did to see its benefit, right? They blow it off because of the so-called tarnish of the temple, which isn't a tarnish, because whatever that is in its own jurisdiction. That's why we can say that we're more Science Temple of America, because we're not corporate, right? Our perspective of this is service to mankind, because that's what it needs right now. You know what I mean? This is the missing key. This is the missing key. Like, we studied everything: Buddhism, Taoism, sex magic, metaphysics. Like, we studied everything. Chematology. Like, we just go through here. We could just go through all the books and stuff that they have in here about everything.
Yes.
You know. But then a few of them have a little mention of the prophet. You know, like, he should be the front of every book. A little write-up, 10 pages about Noble Drew Ali, and then he brought, and this is him. And then if you want to get any information about this, you can go to, and then there's the next 10 pages of every single Moorish Science Temple of America that anybody can go to anywhere they live in the world. Because there were nationality cards written in Spanish.
Okay.
You know, it is said that there were Chinese and Turks and Arabs members of the Moorish Science Temple, and more than likely they're not from America. So why is he nationalizing them? For them to take it back to where they come from and start a Moorish Science Temple over there in Chinese. Because it's a movement to save the nations. You know, this is the Rotary Club, right? Not the international organization called Rotary International. Like, the international organization called Rotary International got its idea from the Moorish movement. Because that's the foundation of using Islam as a tool to uplift fallen humanity. Not using it as a religion. Using it to show that you can earn your rewards by changing your character. You can earn your rewards by having a breakfast club. And how's the Breakfast Club getting paid for? By your dues. That's why you pay dues. Because the dues, like Prophet said, is for the running of the temple. Not for Granchi to get a check every month, or for Chairman to get a check every month, and Mufti to get a check every month, right? The finance that comes in is supposed to go right back to the temple. That way nobody can leech off of it. And that's Noble Drew Ali's words. Right? That the finance has to go back in. Right? The writing that says, you know, the Grand Sheik's supposed to go, put the charter on the wall, and wait a half hour. If nobody comes, take down the charter, go home. Right?
But it's true though, and you know, just for the record, there's no excuse anymore, really, because everybody's hooked up to the internet. You can go to any corner of the globe, and everybody's online. So it's one thing to say, I didn't know any better, so I went and I paid my membership to become a Moor, you know, but there's so much information at your fingertips. You just can't. I think that it's everyone's responsibility to say that whatever they're going to stand by, that you know what you're standing for. You know, so if you're going to say, well, I'm going to go and give my money to these people so I can buy my nationality, when one of the first things that the Prophet said was that nobody can sell it to you and nobody can take it away from you. And if you don't get that simple point from the get-go, you might as well throw in the towel. Because you're already started out wrong, right? And there's no excuse for it, because even if you thought that was correct, all you have to do is do a little bit of research and you find out that it's not. Because there's a lot of people out there that are doing a lot of different things. And in some of it, you have to use your common sense. That's what you got to brain for.
Like the questionnaire, right? Everybody's gonna, yeah, you know, this is our authority. Or our authority at the back of the 101 questionnaire. And this is the authority that we have because we're Moors, etc. And then at the end, it says, see Hers Revised Statute, chapter 32, 36. Like it just says, just see that. Go look that up. See what that is. And that becomes a class in itself. Right? Because that's where the foundation of the movement is. What its activity is. That's the supreme laws that would be handed down to you later. Because he did everything. But because of the sellouts and the agents, at that time, he had to put things in code. That's why he said, everything I say is spirit. He's really saying everything I say is coded. So it's going to take you guys 50 years to figure out what I brought you, and 50 years would have gone and you wouldn't even know that I was here. But the point is, it's going to take you 50 years to figure out the code of what the movement is and how it's supposed to operate. Because I can't just tell you now because, you know, like, I can't even trust the man right next to me. I can't even trust him. I can't even, you know, have a meal. Because like people are poisoning my food. And I know that they're poisoning my food. It's not like, you know, I don't know. I know that they got poison in my food right now. Am I gonna eat this? Should I pretend to eat it? Like what do you do?
You have to taste it.
Any volunteers?
Any volunteers? No?
So, this is an email that was sent out by my brother, Brother M. Moore Bay.
All right, thank you.
When it comes to understanding how the MSTA is a nation state, one needs to study and research the Smithford, Illinois annotated statutes, Chapter 32, Section 164, and the Illinois Religious Corporation Act, 805 Illinois Compiled Statutes 110. The MSTA is a part and parcel of the government of the state of Illinois. Right? So that means jurisdiction-wise, it's still within the jurisdiction of the state of Illinois. The state of Illinois within the jurisdiction of the United States of America. Right? U.S. Every state we function in. Right? So the MSTA is a lawfully founded organization. The MSTA is a divine, religious, and national political movement. So that means we teach the divine laws and laws of the land. So we are long past those who cannot speak on both planes of law. The MSTA is chartered to carry out the Prophet's teachings as stated in our affidavit titled Our Authority, which is on the back of the Moorish Questionnaire 101s. Right.
And then our authority, I, Noble Drew Ali, Morris Holy Temple of Science, held at Chicago in the county of Cook and the state of Illinois on the 20th day of July, 1928, for the purpose of the following persons were appointed sheikhs, according to the rules, usages of such Morris Holy Temple of Science. Do solemnly swear that at a meeting of the members of the Noble Drew Ali, Mealy Eel, Small Bay, Lovett Bay, and Foreman Bay, the Moorish Holy Temple of Science deriving its power and authority from the great Quran of Muhammad to propagate the faith and extend the learning and truth of the great Prophet of Ali in America, to appoint and consecrate missionaries of the Prophet and to establish faith of Muhammad in America. And the said Moorish Holy Temple of Science adopted as its corporate name the following Moorish Science Temple of America. And at said meeting, this affair acted as presiding officer, subscribed, sworn before me, 20th day of July, 1928, Robert Condon, Notary Public.
So there it clearly states that a meeting was held with, if you look it up, with members, of the temple at the time, like the chairman, secretary at the time. And the meeting itself was the establishment, right, or was the act which changed the name of Moorish Holy Temple of Science to Moorish Science Temple of America. So it adopted Moorish Science Temple of America, right? So there's an understanding that there's a thing called the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, right, which is already doing business, and it adopted Moorish Science Temple, right, in order to transact and to, like the Grand Sheik said, get those people, right, who were already scheming, right, to get them into that jurisdiction. Because
that's the jurisdiction.
that's the one that they're gonna
The
fall to.
corporate jurisdiction is where, the fraud goes on. Like when we say the corporate jurisdiction, like, taxes and licenses and the same fraud that we're saying, is the fraud, which and then they have a natural person and a corporate person and all that. That's the fraud jurisdiction, right? So why would he create that for us, right? Knowing that we have, there's different degrees, there's different angles that the movement could be looked at, and then some angles you're blindsided. But if you want to keep looking from that angle, then you know what I mean? Like, the blind side is gonna get you eventually. You know what I mean? Right? Like them them murdering the Prophet and setting it up so that even the death certificate is gonna say not how he died. Right? Like, that's inside job. That's obviously inside job. The death certificate get changed? You know what I mean? That's inside job. So if man's are gonna go that deep to hide, like they're gonna go deep to hide how he died, which other leader like they did that to? You know, and it's a well-known fact that his death certificate got changed amongst the Moors. That's not something that Moors dispute.
Yeah.
Right? Why? Because he was also the Egyptian Adam. And he had a manufacturing business and was selling herbs and all that type of stuff.
You said Ada?
Huh?
Did you say you said Ada?
Adam.
Thank you. What is that?
Like a
Sheep?
high, yeah, like a
Oh,
high
okay.
high in the studies. You know what I mean? Advanced. Right? But he was doing he had the manufacturing company where he was manufacturing like mineral oil and you know body salts, you know, herbs to make tonics and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like so for him to die of tuberculosis, you know, or whatever else they would say that he died from. Just not to say that, yeah, not some people beat him up or whatever, right? Like they just beat him to death, basically, you know.
Was he wealthy?
Huh?
Was he wealthy?
Well, nothing he did was for himself. Everything he did was for the nation, right? Like, he never did anything for him, right? He basically, you know, did everything for us. Everything for us.
According to the United States jurisdiction, like, according to them, he's the heir to the court case that was 60-something thousand acres of land, 3,000 acres of land in Louisiana, plus more. And he didn't sit there and say, okay, I'm gonna hand this down to my daughter or son, or I'm gonna, it like he put not just that, but the whole
Nation of the same
continent into a trust, right? A lawful trust to say that Moors who want to be, you know, citizens of these lands, you're entitled.
All you have to do is proclaim their nationality,
So it's like,
which is free.
if you understand the logic would dictate then that you should like Rashi said, you should put the prophet on the cover of every book, right? And like stop complaining about like them. Like it was 1842. They already gave Drew Ali's ancestors, like
The
they're
land.
not like, yeah, it's your land. Okay, yeah, here, take it.
Prior to him.
Prior to him. And then he comes, right, and then puts the whole thing in trust. So logic would dictate that there's no like nobody can give you an argument if you know who you are. Like there is no argument, like there's no, right? Fighting. That's why it's, you know, Moorish divine and national movement, right? And that's why there was the Canaanite temple, right? We have brothers like J.A. Rogers, right? People are gonna read his books and think, wow, this guy was advanced back in those days. Yeah, he was a member of the old Canaanite temple, right? And see Oscar the Priest, first Asiatic congressman. Like, wow, that was in the 20s, he was a congressman, right? Yeah, he was a member of the temple, right? Because it's just logic.
Right. And we have to go with logic because they're not going to come out and say that they were members of the old Canaanite temple. You know what I mean? Like, because if they say that, that's giving it a chance. You know what I mean? That's having another person say, "Oh, for real? Oscar the Priest was a member." Damn, I voted for that guy. I might as well go join the thing that he's involved in. You know what I mean? But if they keep it hush hush, you know, you'll have people who are members of, you know, the NAACP that would have voted for Oscar the Priest. You know, just because he's a black guy and whatever, you know. But really and truly, like, he was, you know, because the priest, that's really Day. Right? And then Day is one of the Moorish names. You know, just like Matthew da Costa, you know, the Portuguese Moor that came here. Okay, well, yeah, da Costa is not D-A. Da Costa is D-E-Y, Day, the Moorish name. Matthew da Costa, the Moor. And they say the Moor too. It's not like they hide that he's a Portuguese Moor. You know what I mean? And then he's a brother, and they say he's Portuguese. You know what I mean? Like putting it all out there.